Craving the one and only Fong's Pizza? We thought so. Fong's Pizza in Cedar Rapids now delivers. Order direct delivery or curbside pickup from Fong's Pizza by calling 320-9992. All of your Fong's favorites and a Fong's spin on the classics, from their mega pepperoni to the Iowan and street taco. Delivery, takeout, carside to go. Call 320-9992. Fong's Pizza, Newbo District, downtown Cedar Rapids.
Iowans know a thing or two about a hard day's work. That's why we do things the right way at Barntown Brewing. Grain-to-glass beers brewed in-house. Scratch-made food, handcrafted with fresh, locally sourced ingredients. We work hard for the reward of watching our guests enjoy great food and beer. Barntown Brewing. West Des Moines, Waukee.
Hey folks, I'm John Miller. Mark Morehouse is here. Also joining us for this installment of Hawkeye Podcast is Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. And unless you've been living underneath some type of podcast rock or down in a mine somewhere, you know that Mark and Scott, I think, had the preeminent Hawkeye-related podcast. It was the On Iowa podcast that started when they were both at the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Then Scott went his way, and Mark remained at the Gazette, but they were able to continue to do that for a number of years to when it, I think the last episode aired last October. And I know these guys fairly well, even though I don't see them much anymore. We interact on Twitter, and whenever I heard that it was the last On Iowa pod, I learned about it when you guys tweet. I'm like, what the hell just freaking happened? This is not what I want. And then Mark retired. And anyway, you kind of know everything. But Scott, it's so good to see and have you on.
I'm thrilled to be here, as always, and it's always been great. I mean, Mark and I have a million stories from our podcasts from the past. Still some of my favorites were, doing it in the car, driving back from Chicago and Big Ten Media Days. And
Burlington Mall.
In the Burlington Mall, we were on opposite sides because we didn't want the feedback to be bad. The Ghost Pod, I always said it's like the Tupac hologram. When it was Northwestern week in 2015. So yeah, we did it the night before the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. So it was a lot of fun. We enjoyed ourselves, and it's great to be on with you too, John. This is the first time I think we've been on it together. So
it is, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thrilled to be on. Thanks for having me.
I told John that, hey, I've been on a million podcasts with Scott. You guys kind of run the show here tonight, and I'll just kind of retire, maybe have a beer.
And I told Mark, screw that. I'm going to be quiet for once because I want to hear an On Iowa pod going on. So we'll figure it all out as we go along. I guess a lot of topics going on right now, but most recent. Let's just go with football. Iowa's. Well, they didn't have spring practice last year. They had it this year. And Scott, you were in attendance at 2 of the open practices. I know that I watched all of Rob Howe of Hawkeye Nation's video cut-ups, so I've seen every snap the quarterbacks took, thanks to Rob. That's freaking yeoman's work,
right?
From both of those practices. And then I went back and watched them again and only focused on the line play and didn't even follow the ball that time. And I've got thoughts. I know Mark has thoughts, but generally speaking, was this how Iowa often looks in the spring to you? Did anything stand out, good, bad, or indifferent?
After watching all these years, and Mark can attest to this, by usually the end of spring, it's a bludgeoning. The defense always wins and wins big. They know where the ball's going, and they've got good players. Let's face it. I mean, they led the nation last year in stop rate and yards per play. They've got a dynamite back seven. But so beyond that, I didn't really want to look at, if they make a play, they make a play, and you've got to kind of look past it. What I wanted to do was I wanted to watch Spencer in particular and Alex Padilla. How do they go through their progressions? Can they get to a point where they're, either one of them, but specifically Spencer, is he accurate? Is he making good decisions? Can he hold the ball a little bit longer and make good throws? And, I think he was a little bit better than what we saw last fall, but I'm not ready to say, man, he's going to the league next year. I think he's still got a ways to go, and that's they could win games with him. They did last year, but part of it, I look at it. There were 2 starting offensive lineman out. Nico Reganey was out.
Yep.
But then the defense had guys out too. So I'm kind of biting my lip a little bit, but I rated the quarterbacks at like a C+, and I'm not sold that this is the way it's going to end up being, say, come mid-September.
To me, what I guess a million caveats. Every caveat you could think of. You just listed all the caveats.
Yeah.
You just listed offensive line being in some offensive linemen being injured. Yes. Nico Reganey being out. Yes. But also multiple defensive linemen being out. Yes.
Yeah.
And also the fact that you're right. By the end of practices, the defense knows what's coming. Yes. Check. That being said, I will say that the words that Kirk used to describe the quarterback situation prior to spring camp versus what I saw with my eyes, at least in the Rob Howe video cut-ups, and you were there in person, to me, I think I saw a gap that's much more narrow between Spencer and Alex Padilla, with Deuce Hogan a very distant third. To me, and again, this could be just caveat inflated, Petras still looked like a guy that really good teammate, wants to be a leader so badly. He wants to be it so badly that he's still pressing, and he looks like the hunted. When Alex Padilla made me think of Drew Tate, maybe only because of how small he was behind the line. That's probably where my mind started. But Padilla definitely looked like the hunter that I've got nothing to lose. I thought he would look more decisive. His footwork looked better. He just looked where he knew where he wanted to go with the ball. Am I off base?
You're right on. And I think Mark brought it up in either a text or DM or something about that. He reminds him a little bit of David Blau from Purdue. And I think that's right on. Kind of the differences I see is Spencer has a little bit of a swagger to him this year that maybe he didn't last year. He does kind of exude some leadership. That's something maybe I acquired, not necessarily seeing the plays, but just seeing how he interacted with people.
Right.
And I think that's fair. He's in a spot now where he can do that. But in terms of delivering the ball to a receiver where he can do something with it, and I know, you've got a lot of information on yards after the catch and stuff. I still think that's a problem for him. I don't think that's a problem for Alex Padilla. I think he's more accurate, and I think he throws a better ball. Spencer sometimes gets wound up, and I think he could be a better quarterback this year. But I've kind of gotten to that point, and Mark, maybe chime in with this as well, that I've gotten to the point now where this is a good enough team to win the West. And last year they proved it. The way they beat decisively and everybody else from the debacle against Northwestern, that barring some sort of epic disaster injury-wise, it's time to go win a championship. And can he do that? Can Spencer Petras, if you're playing Wisconsin in Madison and it's 17-13 and you got 4 minutes to go, and can he win you the game? I don't know. But Alex Padilla, I don't know either, but right. I'm thinking at this point, I'm like, you might want to give him some real strong first-team reps.
I agree with that. I think I was heartened by the fact that they gave Padilla a package where he could show his stuff in front of the people at Kinnick. That, to me, said, this is more of a competition than you guys think, than we all think. Mm-hmm. I mean, just because they didn't come out and say, yeah, they're killing each other every day in practice. They do kill each other every day in practice. Mm-hmm. Everything is measured, everything. And the fairness. It has to be fair. But in my mind, Padilla, it's closer than people think. And practice every day is going to be murder. And I really do think it is a no-holds-barred competition. It's just one of those things where Ferentz is going to say, yeah, we don't know who we got. And we're trying to hell to find out. I do think just the regular practice rigmarole is going to be enough to figure out who is better than whom. And if it is Petras, I don't think the leash will be as long as it was.
Yeah, I agree. And you look at who they play right off the bat. Right. Now, Indiana at home on Labor Day weekend and then at Iowa State. Neither one of those games are what you would say life or death, simply because you could still win the Big Ten West and do everything you want to do. But it's going to give you an indication of how he can perform. So Iowa could be 2-0. He could play poorly, and then it's time to go, all right, Kent State and Colorado State, we need to make a move here. Or he could play great and they could lose one or both of those games, and then it's not necessarily his fault, because I think Iowa State's at its epic level this year, and that's going to be a really tough game. But but if let's say they go to Ames, they lose 24-14, and he's 14 of 27 passing, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and you just see it where you see guys breaking free, because Stanley always thought read things just a little bit too slow, and that was the difference between being good and great.
Yes, and I think Spencer's the same.
Yeah, and I think Stanley has a better arms, and he's more accurate. And Padilla's better than both, frankly, and he can run. So I think it is close. I mean, talking about Kirk, I asked him a couple different ways just to let's get something out here, and just what is he looking for? He's like, well, we've talked all the time about the accuracy element, not only completions, but in a perfect world, throw the ball where a guy can run with it on top of it, not just make a circus catch and end up on the ground, and processing faster. And that to me tells you a lot. And then he's just saying, I think probably more notable are the other guys kind of closing. If that's the case, Deuce has a trajectory, but I think he's behind the other two. I think Padilla's in the point of, August, to me, they should get first team reps. And if Spencer wins it, go for it. But I think it should be pretty close to even, because heck, he came from Colorado. He came here. He had a Georgia offer. Let him flourish.
Yeah. I would say the difference in just the general difference in arm strength, probably not as big a deal as we think. I do think a Padilla is sort of more of a Greg Maddux type of guy, hitting his spots. And David Blau, a couple years, 2018, Scott, that game, that agonizing, the only game that I can remember Ferentz bitching about the refs.
Yeah, right.
And you remember it well, that Purdue locker room. But anyway, I think Padilla hits his spots. Maybe he doesn't hit an RPM that people want to see. But the last two quarterbacks, I would say Stanley and Petras, they're John and I accidentally said touch zone. I think there's a zone where a quarterback needs to display touch. Those underneath routes, crossers, you need to display some touch. Stanley and Petras kind of sucked at those. If I have a quarterback who can just hit it on the right shoulder, all of a sudden you have yak. All of a sudden you have chains moving. Stanley, I thought, hit the wrong shoulder way too many times. Just uncomfortable, way too late a lot of times. Saw the play way too late. And one thing I really wanted to get out of KOK a couple of years ago is what he's looking for in a quarterback. And he brought up anticipation. And to me, that's a big thing. Spencer really, and also I think, remember at the end of 2017, Scott, the Pinstripe Bowl, when Brian was able to talk about Stanley in his first year, he talked about pocket presence. To me, that didn't change a whole hell of a lot for Stanley. That might just be athleticism or lack thereof. I think Petras is kind of the same QB.
Lack of feel for sure.
Lack of feel, or lack of IQ, or lack of a good plan, or knowing where he's in charge of the protections. He's got to know where there's potential problems. So that just, to me, you look at how Trevor Lawrence used the pocket. Yeah, that's what everybody wants. That's what makes plays longer. And I would say Trevor Lawrence is not a burner. Good feet. But Iowa quarterbacks have not used the pocket for shit the last two. Stanley, Petras. I want to see a quarterback who can make something happen when the shit hits the fan. I was going to have everybody blurt out what their hot spot is. Mine's offensive tackle. Period. New guys, and John and I talked about this last podcast. It was 2016 the last time they had new guys, Ike and Boone Myers.
That was 15, yeah.
20, yeah. It was, didn't pass for a ton of yards. It was effective.
Well, Beathard was good. He was like
Beathard made stuff happen.
Yeah, 2,800 yards that year. But I know what you're saying, and I agree with everything that you're saying, and I want to come back around to the fire aspect as well. Yeah. But you guys were talking about delivering ball on time, on target, that allows the receiver the opportunity to do something with it after. This week, Brandon Smith tweeted something to the effect of like, I should have got the ball more. I went and
you brought that up. I had it on the list. I forgot.
Yeah, I went and looked. I bit the bullet and subscribed to Pro Football Focus this week, and boy, am I glad I did.
Yeah.
I looked at Smith's yak yards after catch, right? In 2020, last year, and in 2019, his yak in last year was 2 yards. 2 yards. ISM's yak last year was 5.1, just for comparison. Smith's yak in 2019 with senior Nate Stanley was just 2.4, and ISM's was 5. Now, there are a number of other factors that go into it. They were playing in different positions, etc. But I think that, as we've all just diagnosed here the last 5 minutes, neither Stanley nor Petras to this point in time is delivering the ball on time and to the right territory that gives these athletic, potentially dynamic playmakers the opportunity to go make plays.
No question. And, one statistic that really kind of showed me what last year was like for Petras was 2.5 seconds. If he delivered a ball under 2.5 seconds, he completed 67%. Now, part of that was scripted in the first quarter because he was pretty good in the first quarter. And it was also first read, slant, boom, whatever it was. Once he got to his second and third reads after 2.5 seconds, that plummeted to 44.7. That was worst in the Big Ten. And so that meant when he couldn't get to his first read, or he had to move a little bit, because he really wasn't pressured a whole lot. I thought, you look at like Beathard. If Beathard had the line that either Stanley or Petras had, oh my God, how good would that have been? I mean, if you had Wirfs or somebody like that. So I think this year, as Mark mentioned, having new tackles, they're going to get rushed, especially when they're going against Will McDonald and guys that Indiana has a really good pass rush. So I think that's going to be a challenge. And if it's Petras, he doesn't have the feet that Padilla has. And I think he's going to have to start looking at second and third options. He hasn't proven he can do it. Maybe he can, but and I don't want to throw him away because he's, still young and growing, and last year was such a rough year, but I think he's got to grow pretty fast, or otherwise it's time to move on to the next guy.
I will bet the farm that the starter in week 2 is Spencer Petras. I don't think Kirk starts Alex Padilla in Jack Trice Stadium for his first road game.
He's hot and cold in that. I remember young Brandon Wager going crazy as a true freshman, but that's running back.
But he didn't have to throw the ball.
Excellent point.
But Stanley did, though. That was his first road start.
That's a good point. But
he threw 5 touchdowns that day.
And we all gave him a Heisman.
Yeah, we did. Had the kid from that wound up going to directional Michigan school, or came from
Uyghurs.
Yeah. Was he still on campus, or had he left by then?
First year, yeah.
First. So Stanley. Okay. My biggest fear. Do we think that Kirk learned anything from Jake Christensen v. Ricky Stanzi in 2008? To me, Jake was the guy that Kirk wanted to succeed, not because Kirk had anything against Ricky, but because Jake was so invested in the program, that Jake was such a leader and ringleader of that 2005 recruiting class, that I just felt that Kirk wanted so badly for Jake to succeed because he cared so much for him, and it just didn't happen. And because Kirk was a little blinded or biased, potentially, my opinion, he held on too long. I'm hoping something like that doesn't happen again.
And
I actually think 2016 was worse quarterback. Like Lee Harvey Oswald, prison transfer choreography bad. Thank you, Dennis Miller. I thought 2016 was horrific, was poorly handled, and I thought 2014 quarterback Scott. You remember sitting out at Maryland when Kirk got pissed. The question came up. I think it was you or me. We were both just like, kind of frothing to get down there and say, "What? Why in the hell wasn't Beathard in there?"
Yeah,
and that's not how you ask that question after a game. But the question was basically asked that way, and Kirk just got more and more pissy about being asked that question. And I remember on the radio when some fan, just asked the most innocent question they can think of. And boy, oh boy, his answer was petulant, I would say. And it was unhealthy. Same two principles are in here. Actually, that was 20. Yeah, those both would have been Greg Davis.
Yeah. Are you talking about the competition between Stanley and Wiegers?
Not so much. No, 2016 to me.
How they never used Stanley.
Are you mean the 2016 season when Beathard was there?
Yeah, Beathard. Yeah. Beathard. 2014 was the one where it was Rudock and Beathard. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. 2016 was different. 2014. 2014 was the calamity for quarterbacks. 2016 was a different calamity in that Beathard had no one to throw to in the Outback Bowl, and oh boy, that pissed everyone off. I think 2014 was very poorly handled, and it cost him Rudock, who actually now is still Harbaugh's best quarterback. Yes. And you saw what it did when the way that they went out of their way to announce Beathard's the guy, and you saw how the team embraced and kind of came together. And January 2015, and then January 2016, they're in the damn Rose Bowl. Right. So that was handled beautifully, but they had to learn the hard way, and the hard way was that god awful bowl game at the Hawkslayer Bowl. I have a hard time trusting that I think Kirk gets too invested. I think John made a great point. Kirk gets too invested in the guy, and that might be through recruiting, because with quarterbacks, man, it's more and more of a realtor show. They're trying to sell you the house, and that's a tough deal.
I think there's a couple things in there. One, I understand Kirk backing the quarterback, and you have to. You have to stand behind him, and you know that things are going to be rough, and they're not going to be perfect. And you got to grow with them and grit your teeth, and you're going to see some bad games once in a while, and hope that you just kind of pull it out and play ferret's ball and punt and do all kinds of things and pull it out. But I also think what works against him in situations like this is he's sometimes risk averse to a fault. And instead of just saying, all right, we're just going to have to go do this, he just takes that step back and, let's punt from the +40 on 4th and 4 rather than go for it. Now, he's been better about it, but I think quarterback's kind of the last vestige in this environment for him. And that's why I'm not saying Spencer Petras is going to be number one or number two. I still think that they should probably have a good, open, healthy competition in camp. But I think if Padilla is showing that he's the better guy, I think he owes it to his team and then himself to pull the trigger, because 8-4, 9-3, those are good records, but they haven't won a division since 15, and they've had 2 or 3 teams last year, and I would say in 2018 for sure. I think that those were divisional championship teams, and they didn't get it done. Why? A game here, a game there. Brian is called great games, and then he's called one stinker per year. Last year, you don't let him throw 51 times against that defense that knows you better than you know yourself. I mean, Fitzgerald's been there for 15 years. Hankowitz has been coaching it with him when he was with the Badgers. And those linebackers, I think they joined the program when I was still at the Gazette. It was like 5 years ago, Gallagher and Fisher. So
that's a great point.
Newsom wasn't there, but they turned Brandon Joseph into an All-American. I mean, so
that was a salty ass defense last year Northwestern had.
And they're only down 1 point, and they're playing like they're down 10. When Kerner picked off that pass with about 8 minutes to go, and they're at like the 35 in Northwestern, down 1, that's the time to say, we're just going to bully our way inside the 30, kick the field goal, take the lead. And instead, Petras threw a wacky pass that was too far for Laporta. It bounces in the air, and Joseph intercepts it, and they win by a point. And that's the difference between going to Indy and, kind of going to the Music City Bowl.
I think it's important. You bring up a sense of urgency this year in the West. I think you're exactly right when you say 2018 was a championship caliber team. 2019 was a championship caliber team. 2020 championship caliber team. Mm-hmm. I mean, they all have been. And there's been agonizing losses. Purdue 2018, 2019. I'm blanking on 2019, but
well, that year
3 losses.
They had 3 losses, which
The
is
Michigan game.
The Michigan game was Brian's fault on that one.
Yes.
21 straight passes in the fourth quarter when you're down by a touchdown. And I think that's where you need to pull back the reins. Just play the game the way you've schemed it instead of pressing. And then last year, Spencer Petras' first start against a really good defense, and you're having him throw 51 times. I mean, the week before, and I have these statistics that I went through every game about, like when they went Wildcat, they were 17 for 115. They averaged like 6 yards a carry even when they had jet sweep motion. And they didn't even do that once against Northwestern. And it's like, I think afterwards I did ask Kirk about that, and he said, well, they do a good job against that. Well, obviously, you're judging their scheme on something that doesn't exist. So I just think that they need this year, the excuses, barring a major epidemic or pandemic like we've been dealing with, I think it's time for them to put on their big boy pants and go win some games. They're not going to go undefeated, but go to Madison and win. Go to Evanston and win. Go to Ames. Well, that one might be a different story, but just be in Indianapolis because you have the team capable of doing it.
I agree. And I do think a lot left on the table, and the last few years, they do need to put Northwestern getting to Indianapolis for a second time before Iowa. That should piss everyone off. Period.
And by the end of the year, it was amazing to see how good that defense was last year. That was, I'll say that this was the best defense they've had since 2004. They were even better than they were way back in 2009 and 10 when they were really good, and they had a great front line because they had just better players than the back 2 levels. And just 5 out of the last 6 games they won by 14 points or more. They were playing at a very high level. And if Michigan wouldn't have quit, they had COVID issues. Correct myself here. 6 positives that week, and contact tracing turned out to be 50. Okay. I'll believe that one.
Harbaugh will have his team playing intramurals next fall.
They should.
Out of sight, out of mind. Hey, we want to have our spring practice. You can't come. We're under construction. Jim, you're fired. If this is a real, if you were getting paid a real living wage, you'd be fired.
Yes.
I think he's the worst thing that's happened in the Big Ten in a long time. He's ruined Michigan football.
I know.
Taking it lower than Brady.
Think about that. Think about he's ruined Michigan football. He won't put it out in the public in the spring for people to see. That's horrible. Anyway,
he's like you're stuck in a snowbank and you blow the engine just trying to put it in reverse. Yes. And it's like all you have to do is pull it forward and tilt it the other way. And no, we're going through the snowbank, and then we're stuck. Forget it. And that's kind of what happened last year. Why they didn't play Ohio State or Iowa, but those would have been gross.
Right. Yes, for sure. You mentioned the defense, and I love hearing you compare to the 2004 standard because I also think 2004 is the standard.
I agree.
I mentioned something to Mark a couple of weeks ago. He was hesitant, so I'm not afraid to mention it again, and you can piss all over me if you want. I think that this back 7 has a chance to be potentially the best of the Ferentz era.
Scott knows how did I respond, Scott? Tell him.
Boy.
Defensive lines win championships.
Yeah. I agree. I
know.
I think back to the 2005 team. When was it? When they had Webema and the kid from Madison.
Yep.
And then they had Klug, or not Klug, but King and then the kid from Mount Vernon, Kroll. And asking Kirk Ferentz a question: would you rather have an inexperienced defensive line and the experienced linebackers, or the opposite? And as after he was political, of course, you'd rather have the defensive line. I want to ask about defensive line as well, because maybe they've got more bodies now than we thought they had going in, but maybe not a dude yet. But that back 7 to me looks like they can take care of themselves if the defensive line can just be gap disciplined and be a roadblock against the run.
Yeah, you got a great point. And the one thing I will say is out of let's start with the secondary, and they've got all five guys are returning. So, I'm watching the second unit. They've got players ascending there that you go, like Jamari Harris or Sebastian Castro, and you're going, man, they would normally play. They're that good. So they're pretty deep, and Xavier Williams really hasn't got a chance to really show what he can do yet either. And I love Jack Campbell. I mean, just like football man crush on Jack Campbell.
He's Urlacher, man. He's Urlacher.
He is to the nth degree. Last year, he had mono. He missed the first 3 games. He got in there. He rotated with Seth Benson, who's kind of like a politically correct version of Pat Angerer. Just kind of this, I don't know, he's got a mullet and everything, but he's FCA guy, but man, he can thump. But I will say, Jack Campbell, 6'5", 240, just impacts the game every time he goes in there. I mean, like 1 out of every 9 plays he did something, whether it was a tackle, an interception, or a fumble recovery. Just, I think he could be a field tipper. And Justin Jacobs also took that step forward too. And even though they're at the cash primarily, they still ran 44-3, 24%. So they still need that backer. And Dane Belton, Kayvon Merriweather was a guy who I thought really had a great spring. So, an athletic guy. So yeah, I think their back 7 could be really good. I don't know that I see a first rounder, a Des King, but then again, I didn't think Josh Jackson would do what he did in 2017 either.
Right.
But my biggest positional question outside of quarterback, which is a different animal, is D tackle right now. And
who are the candidates? I know you didn't get to see Yahweh. YA. I'm just screwing up every time.
Think of YA Tittle.
I was looking it up, the pronunciation guide, and I couldn't find it. So you didn't get to see him play. You didn't get to see Black play. You didn't get to see a couple other linemen play.
Yeah.
Logan Jones, I think people see the weightlifting and they get the stars get in their eyes a little bit. I'm kind of like, okay, if this kid can give you 15 to maybe 20 snaps a game right now as a freshman, well, you're way ahead of the game.
Without a doubt.
I don't know where he is weight-wise either.
He's listed officially right now at 267, but they didn't change the weights from January, so it could be a little more than that. He hurt his knee, I think it was, and he missed the last 2 weeks. Logan Lee hasn't really been around for 2 years, and it's not like, it's like, all right, you're going to have to get on the field at some point here.
I had big plans for him.
Yeah, right. I still think that he could do that, but we haven't seen it. So until I see it, I don't really want to go there on that. I think Logan Jones, when Phil Parker says, he goes, I don't really want to compare him to this, but he's kind of like Mitch King. And you kind of go, oh, really? Now I look more and say more Klug than King. But if he impacts the game that way, that's great. And in YA Black, everybody's talked big about him. But, I haven't had a chance to see him in practice yet. And that's really going to be a key. Noah Shannon is, I talked to him about it, and he just said he sees himself more like Nathan Budgeta. And I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Short, squatty, not an NFL guy probably, but goes out and gets the job done.
He can play too good. He has a good 2-gap body.
Yes, and he'll do exactly what you ask him to do. A great soldier. This is the one area where they are exploring the transfer portal. They have an offer or 2 out now. I think that's what they need. Just one rotational body, because I think they got a lot of good talent in that freshman area with Logan Jones and YA Black. It's just, do you want those guys going up against Breece Hall and that line and that team in Ames in the fourth quarter, and because I think it's going to be close, but if it's 20-17 and they're winning and it's 3rd and 3, can they get a stop? I don't know that they can, but if you get somebody in there who, last year, Jack Heflin was a godsend. Players like that, you could just plug and play, get through the year. They go to the NFL, And hey, by the way, the ding, the timer's off and the oven and everything's done, for 2022. So that's my real concern area, because I think on the edge they may not have an Epineza, but John Wagner reminds me of a guy that you guys brought up a few minutes ago, Brian Madison.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit better, but he really looked good this spring.
Brian Madison, you go back and check out his sack numbers. That guy got to the QB. He was a really good football player. Played a few years as an offensive lineman in the NFL.
Yeah, right.
I had a quick aside for you, but I totally forgot. Hot spots. I talked about offensive tackle. What about you two guys? Where do your eyes fall for weaknesses, potential weaknesses on the 2021 team?
Go ahead, Scott.
You think defensive tackle? Defensive tackle?
My three areas of concern would be defensive tackle until they get it, until I can see it. I'm not gonna close my eyes and take that leap of faith. Right. I think offensive tackle is a weakness. Jack Plum played okay. I thought you could see him getting better, but I think that it's just going to take a little bit more time. I'm not sure about right side, and that's where they really hurt, because Cody Ince is slated to move out. He played really well by the end of the year at guard.
I agree.
He's gonna move outside, but you would have liked to have seen him move outside, because Wagner went up against Nick DeYoung, who I think is probably a year away. That was not a very good matchup. That was kind of Carl Davis versus Jordan Walsh. Like we had to bleep out that one video from 2013 or 14 or whatever it was.
I'm just glad we did not have the video going for Adrian Claiborne against the Canadian kid,
Nolan McMillan.
McMillan. Oh, I wanted to call over the grandstand and go to the hospital. It's like, there's been a murder. You got to get over here.
I know they need to bring the helicopter on the field and everything.
The sound that made was horrific. I was like, that kid's never going to be okay again. Get him off the field. So I kind of think wide receiver. What do you guys think about wide receiver? I know they're losing a lot there. And I also want to ask, did Brandon have a point?
So that I'm going to segue into that. Wide receiver, does it matter? Did Brandon have a point? Yeah, but Brandon chose to come to the University of Iowa, where, as I've been saying for years, Iowa wide receivers lead the nation in number of miles traveled in wind sprints, because this is a program that's not Iowa's route trees. They're spacing on some routes. I mean, I love Iowa's waggle game. I call it a waggle because that's what we called it in high school, but the bootleg action to the left, come back to the right. And they have three levels of receivers there on the drags, but all too often those levels get compressed. Really, the defense compresses on Iowa's defense, period, because Iowa doesn't stretch the field vertically, because that's just not what they do. So did Brandon have a point? Probably. But he
knew he was getting into. He knew he was getting into.
Maybe so, but I think that, my opinion on that's kind of vacillated this week. But I think with the players that they have, I think the receiver core that they have is probably upper third of the Ferentz era, which isn't necessarily saying a ton.
I would say that's probably, you're saying that because of Tyrone Tracy.
Well, you got Tracy, Reganey, I think is a really good player. I mean, you got two guys right there. And then honestly, when you're talking about Iowa wide receivers, beyond the top two, when has there ever been three guys with 40 to 50 catches in a season in the Ferentz era? Your best target is going to be your tight end. It's going to be Laporta.
There you go.
So in Iowa's offense, that's a glorified wide receiver. So I think they're fine.
Scott, I heard a bunch of different names at wide receiver coming out of last week, and injuries, or to me, I think they've had some misses, and they're kind of showing up a little bit now.
Well, I guess first to start with the Brandon comments, I kind of look at it as good, bad, and ugly. And one is, yes, he has a point. They should have done that more with him.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that I think the venue was poor and the choice and the timing was really bad, but he does have a point that they should have done that more. However, the quarterback that was capable of doing that wasn't there last year. And this guy could not get the ball down the field very regularly because he just wasn't very good past his first read or hanging in the pocket very long, So, he did get targeted a lot. But then I also look at the ugly part of it, which is he had the most drops on the team. He had 4. He had 3 fumbles. And to top it off, their yards per carry last year was the best they've had since Sean Green was there.
Mm-hmm.
They were at almost 4.7 yards per carry. They were rolling people, in the running game, and they have the best running back since Sean Green. So, you're an Iowa wide receiver, but you're winning games by 14 plus points, some of them by more than that. You might want to say, hey, that's good. But I will say that doing it the day after you sign a free agent contract, is not the smartest thing in the world, because how often do undrafted free agents go and make teams, especially at that position? Not very often. So I think, rather than throw some shade at your coaches for not using you, maybe you just mutter it under your breath, tell other people, and if you get announced your name and on Sunday Night Football, you say Lake Cormorant High School instead of Iowa.
I think it's I like that reason better than fans saying, well, he should have known what he was getting into. 18 years old, took his best opportunity.
Right.
I'm not faulting the kid for that.
For sure.
But I hear you guys. That's the thing the fans go to right away. I kind of applaud the candor. Timing, Scott's right.
Yeah. But to Mark's other question, Scott, overall wide receiver position, your thoughts?
I'm a
little nervous about it.
It's not nearly as bad as it was, say, when Stanley and Wiegers were throwing to what were their names? Devontae Young and Adrian Falconer, and in that spring where neither one of them had caught a pass to that point or ever past that. Not that bad at all. And Tyrone Tracy is
legit,
right? No question. And I think Nico Reganey is a guy that can do enough things to catch the ball. Hey, he's a slot receiver for Iowa. He's going to catch the ball. Last year was the first time since Marvin that the slot receiver didn't lead the team in catches. That was Laporta. But third receiver, I think it's going to go to a true freshman. I think Keegan Johnson's your guy. He was out there with the first unit. So was Charlie Jones. And it probably will be kind of some sort of rotation among the two of them.
I would agree.
But Keegan, he looks good. He's mature for his age. And, he's got a dad, his brother's is off to the NFL. His dad played at Nebraska. He picked Iowa. He came in early. I think I think he might start at some point. No Iowa freshman had ever started the opener, but number 2 was Dez in game 2 after
That's right.
Lomax got hurt. And then game 3 was Dominique Douglas in 2006.
That's right.
So I think he could fit that. And I think he could be really good. And game breaker, maybe not quite yet. But at this point, I look at him and I think, at worst, I don't mean this, but worst case scenario, he's Keenan Davis. And so I think he's got the look, he's got the build. And Arlen Bruce is not going to play a lot this year, but he'll be a big-time contributor. And he'll be at some point, and he'll be definitely a guy that does some interesting plays. He's been in the backfield for Wildcat with Tyler Goodson, so he's a quick twitch guy.
Tell me about Wildcat, Scott. Do you think that I love it? I don't know why they waited so long. It was effective.
Yeah.
So Iowa in about 2047 should be into RPOs, right?
Is it going to be Brian or Brian's kid John parents to be the head coach?
Is that still going on? I thought that was over.
No, I was just kidding.
Yeah. No, I know.
Lord,
I gotcha.
Lord, no. Remember those 2 moratoriums we always had? Until we can't talk about Brian replacing Kirk, and we can't talk about the ending of the Iowa State series.
I was packing up our house in Oklahoma, listening to your guys' interview, I think with Brian last spring, right? And I thought to myself, hell, this guy's a natural. He's a shoe-in for the next coach. And then June came, and they're like, okay, that's over. That changed everybody's paradigms there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you, Scott, have an analog for Arlen Bruce? Is he Tyrone Tracy starter kit? Do you have a Hawkeye from the past analog for what you think Bruce could be maybe in 2022?
I think he's a little bit different than what we've seen. I would say he's probably a little bit thicker and quicker version of Nico Reganey. So I think he's a lot like Tracy, but maybe a little quicker. Gotcha. And but Tracy is more full service than he even was a couple years ago. The guy, and I'm not calling him this, but just body and style of play at this level, Steve Smith. That's the way and the other day, or not the last practice, he didn't compete, but he was the best player on the field, and Goodson was good too. I mean, he's taken a step up, but I'm like, wow, this guy can really play. And I actually think they'll be better at X with Tracy rather than Brandon Smith. Because remember 2 years ago when he stepped in for Brandon, he played really well. He right. And they've only had 3 receivers since Marvin catch 30 passes for a 16-yard average. And it was Tavon Smith, and that was only 30 catches and 15. And then Amir and Tyrone in 2019. I think he could do that and more. So it's really, to me, can they find 2 other receivers? And I think they can. I think Keegan's a guy. Charlie Jones will be a decent guy. And then Arlen Bruce is going to be kind of a gadget guy. Jet sweeps, getting some passes, maybe run the ball if they need him to, and probably kickoff returns and stuff.
I got a super geeky question. Who's the second tight end?
Luke Lachey.
You think he sticks?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the number 2 throughout the whole. Like every time they lined up in 12 personnel, he was number 2. Really tall, like 6'7". And could jump out of the gym and stuff. And it's funny, in the first scrimmage, he made some really good catches. And I'm thinking, and run after catches, I'm thinking, wow, this guy's the real deal. And so I kind of wrote that. And then Brian kind of smacked me upside the back of my head in the press conference. I could tell he was like he was bearing down at me on Zoom. And he's like, yeah, but you guys didn't write about the block that he blew the very next play. He goes, I'm sure his parents loved reading about how good of a receiving threat he was. So, and he's right. He's right. But, the other day they actually had the other 2 out there. Meeman, who got in big trouble, did a lot of dumb things. He was all right. And Elijah's, that was the first time I'd seen Elijah Yelverton out there. And I thought, okay, nothing that I would say he's going to go out and be the next TJ Hawkinson or anybody, but Meeman's body, and he might be a pretty good player too.
I think all those tight ends could be something yet, but there's a lot of them, and but there's going to be opportunity coming this way. You guys see how they target the tight end. Last year, John, how many more targets did Laporta have than everybody else?
I think it was at least 5 or 6 wide of it. Scott, I think, has his handwritten notes right there by his side.
I do. He had 56 targets because sometimes the targets, when you're doing it on TV, you don't see where the ball's going in a lot of cases. Well, I kept track of it. He had 56 targets. I think second was a tie between Brandon and Amir at 42. So it was
more than 5.
Yeah, there was early on in the year. It was almost like, dude, I know they're their buddies, but don't throw the ball to Nico and Sam Laporta all the time, So, and I think there probably was some sort of message sent, whether it was the receivers getting pissed off and telling Copeland, who then would tell Ken or Brian, and so they did start throwing the wide outside guys later on.
Is it as much buddies as it is a function of the offense and a function of Petras's comfort level? Because those guys are, probably the closest to the line of scrimmage of any of the other targets. And those are the quick, easy bailout passes in Iowa's system.
That's a great point. He's closer with them. The other 2 were older than he was. Right. I do think that might have been something. I also think, because he wanted to get rid of the ball so fast that they were the first people that flashed in front of him.
That's
it.
Where
they were.
Yeah.
And, to that point, you're going, is he even developed enough to really run this offense? And last year was a weird year. They didn't have spring. They didn't have summer. They didn't have really any fall training camp. It was just, hey, we're starting football in 3 weeks. We got to get going. But, he's got to use the outside more. And in the last 2 games, he did. He threw 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. And you take away the second half of the Northwestern game, and it was 9-2. Those are numbers you win with, but you can't take away that second half. That was the difference between going to Indy and going nowhere.
Right. I kind of chuckled, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way. I think Iowa fans appreciate it when columnists write stories about the new place kicker.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of chuckled on Saturday when Pat Hardy, his first thing that he wrote, his takeaway was an article on the kicker. I'm like, ooh, is that indicative of a bad practice when the biggest thing that stood out to you was the kicker? But, Iowa's kicker, Kirk likes to play things to the NFL percentages, and a lot of games can come down to that kicker. Obviously, the punter is an extension of the defense, and Iowa's got a pretty good answer at punter and Torrey Taylor. Yeah. Caleb Shudak, what'd you think?
Good. The best sequence I saw of the practices, and this was a Petras sequence, 2-minute drill, was able to move them down the field, get them in field goal range, and Shudak kicked a 46-yard field goal on the last play from the right hash mark. And I thought, okay, that's what you need to do. Your quarterback moved you in position. I think he actually moves better in kind of a hurry-up situation anyway as a quarterback, but Shudak made the kick. And so overall, you're thinking, okay, this isn't bad. But as we know, and you brought it up, there's going to be a game where he's going to have to kick 3, maybe even 4 field goals. There's going to be a game where Madison, it could be 16-16, 13-13. He might have a 36-yarder into the wind. Can he kick it? I think he can, but we're not going to know until that game.
Right.
And it's going to be the difference between him being Keith Duncan or Daniel Murray or Marshall Kane versus not. And he'll be the GOAT if you miss that. So I think he can, but until he does it, you just kind of got to cross your fingers, I guess.
In defense about writing about the kicker in spring, and
I wasn't dogging Pat.
No. I know. I
was wondering if it was indicative of just the kind of day it was in Iowa City.
It just got my lizard brain beat writer mind going, and I'm thinking, it's a hell of a story. The kid is a 6-year senior.
Yeah.
His dad kicked at Iowa State. He's bled for this.
Yeah.
Do you want to spend that real estate or that capital in spring? I saved that sucker for let me see. I don't have this. I saved that for at Maryland because that's something you can write and have in game day and not worry about.
Yeah,
I read it. Or it's your Tuesday story for Wednesday on Iowa State week.
Yeah.
The last time Iowa had a kicker play against the Cyclones, he kicked 4 field goals in each of the 4 quarters in 4 different kinds of weather and lighting and everything. And
special teams really mattered.
They won by 1 point. And Terry Roberts, superhero, as always, he kind of forced the guys to run into each other, and then the recovery by Devontae Young. So.
Hey, let's hit a little NIL.
Yeah, I was just saying, time to transition probably.
Yeah, Scott, what is the vibe at the Athletic and how it's going to go? Of course, I've been talking on Twitter today with people from Iowa, and John has talked to Jordan Bohannon about it. And Iowa is behind it currently. I don't see how Iowa has it in place for next year. Just the political machinations have closed seemingly for this year, and that I think that's very, very dangerous for Iowa college universities that are in big time recruiting. I think that's rolling the dice. But you're also talking about the Iowa Senate, fairly conservative, a lot of Republicans, and I'm going to guess that maybe there's a certain faction in there that is like, you know what, college kids shouldn't get paid. We're not voting on this. But that's just crazy guy in the woods in Illinois.
Yeah, you're in Illinois now, right?
Yep. I'm where the Bears are.
Hey, yeah. Super Bowl shuffle coming our way. No, John's already had his Super Bowl shuffles here, but no, Iowa's behind politically. I think from what Barta has said, Barta's opinions have changed drastically over the years. And I think sometimes he sticks his finger in the air and licks it and, okay, that's the way I'm going to go. And I think that's kind of the case here.
It's true.
But they are supportive of it. They understand it's coming. They want it to be universal, probably more so at the federal level to give everybody kind of the same laws. They're waiting for the Supreme Court, the Alston decision. There's a lot there. They are having classes that today, even the compliance assistant athletic director for compliance said that they're having what they're calling NIL 101s with teams and players to tell them, hey, this is what's coming. This is what to be prepared for. We'll give you more details when we know specifics here. Will it kill them in 1 year? Probably not. In 2 years, if nothing happens next year federally or statewide, then yeah, it's going to be used against them big time. But it's interesting because we look old timers, probably me and you for sure, and I don't know about John, but we kind of look at it first as
John's 50.
Yeah, I'm 50. You're the young one here.
But he's the young one in thought. That's what I was saying. He's more adventurous and that sort of thing. Yeah. But no, we look at it as like commercials and car dealerships and signings and stuff. They look at it as monetizing their YouTube and Twitter accounts and stuff like that, which it kind of goes, oh yeah, that's probably the way to do it, right?
Right.
And I think so that way market isn't going to matter as much as we thought. But when it comes to the market, what I find fascinating is a lot of people think, well, everybody's going to want to go to Northwestern and Minnesota. And I'm like, no, it's going to be the exact opposite, because if you're in Minneapolis, the Gophers are 5th. In Chicago, Northwestern is below everybody, 6th, 7th, 8th, something like that. No car dealership is going to say, hey, I want the best Wildcat. They're going to go for the worst bear over the best Wildcat. And then same thing in Minneapolis. They'll take a practice team on the Vikings over a Gopher. But in Iowa City or Lincoln, they'll take anybody. So I think it's going to be more advantageous for, or Ames, they'll go to Des Moines market, whatever. I think they'll be fine there. But I do think Iowa as a state or federally has to catch up. And it will. It'll happen. It's just this things are going kind of slow because everybody else is kind of moving at a different pace.
I don't want to go Chicken Little on it. I don't want to say, oh my God, Iowa's going to be so far behind and they're screwed, because we don't know. And we're talking about Jack Whitfer, who played for the Cyclones. So I think he probably gets what it needs to be. I worry about Iowa being too conservative here. And you look at what Georgia has come up with, and Iowa and Georgia, I would probably put them on the same sort of wavelength as far as, because it's a Republican state, conservative state, and they want to give 75% of athletes money to other athletes, which it's a nice idea.
Isn't it called socialism, Mark?
I didn't want to say that word. But it kind of is. I mean, it's not kind of is. It totally is. But I do. I think I like the collegial part of that. I was like, okay, if everybody's doing well. But that's one example. California, I imagine, will be the exact opposite, where, hey, take your money and run.
It's funny. The free markets in California and the socialisms in Georgia, that's, I don't know if I can figure that out correctly. But
it's going to be, politics are going to matter in these, I think. I think Illinois, I think Northwestern and Illinois will be able to, I think it'll be a fairly liberal law here.
I mean, I don't know why Whitfer didn't at least allow it out of committee. The Senate File 256 in Iowa, and I think Whitfer was the guy.
Yeah.
To me, I almost see things getting funneled down to two camps, which is, welcome to 2021. Everything's one or the other, and you almost have this fundamentalist, fervent belief in how things have is always the way things should be. These are amateurs. Their scholarship is enough, and we don't want them to let the big bad boogeyman with money come in because they wouldn't know what to do with it, and it can cause all these problems. Let's just keep it how it's been, versus true free market mindset is there's no other student on campus that is not allowed to monetize their name, image, and likeness. If a guy comes, a sophomore comes up with a great idea over at the Tippy School of Business, he can go out and market it and make money. Just the same way that we all can go market our wares and make money, which is why we went to college in the first place, is to make more money. And to that group of people, which I consider myself one, I see the other people as fundamentalist weirdos. Again, 2021, I just don't get what Whitver's rationale was not to let this one come out of committee. I don't get it. And I'm probably I thought about this today, and now that I'm saying it publicly, I'm going to reach out and see if he'll talk to me about it. I bet he won't, but I'm going to try.
It's worth a shot. I mean, I hope there's some transparency. I hope he would state, feel like he can say his, state his reasoning. I hope he can do that. I hope somebody gets to that.
I know he can do it. I hope he will do it.
Right. That's what I.
Right.
I am. If I knocked on his door, I'd be like, I would have to. I would just pitch it as a straight Q&A, and so no one can. So there's no interpretation into it. I mean, it's just you talking. Period. Boom. There it is.
I understand the desire, the fear, and ignorance, not in a bad tone, but just the fear of the unknown of what this could do. And
yes, that's it.
And I think you've got to open up your mind on this one, because everybody's fearing that, everybody's going to go to Alabama and Texas. Well, they already do, and they already will. The best players will go there, and then the other ones will funnel down to every other school. Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, they'll still get all those guys. It's about coaching and development at that level. But I think the thing that I'm excited to see is, for particularly football players and basketball players, is for most of them, the height of their marketability is at the University of Iowa. If you're Marvin McNutt, yes, you went to the pros for 3 years, whatever it was, but everybody knew you as 7 got 6 at Iowa. And now he's been able to kind of market himself in our environment, but other ones, Kevonte Martin-Manley or Akram Wadley or, CJ Beathard even. I mean, he's a backup in the NFL. But at Iowa, or Josie Jewell, he's he could go do whatever. And, and have camps in your hometown and things like that. That should be easy. If you can make a grand, hey, I'm going to have a 2-day camp in my hometown of, Denison, Iowa, and I'm Brandon Sheriff. You should be able to do that. That's to me where this is. It's kind of foolhardy and they already get a scholarship and they get all this other stuff. Well, you're not paying for it. Right. Somebody else is. So what's the difference between signing some autographs? Now, what I will say is, and this is where the NCAA dropped the damn ball, that what could have happened 4 years ago or 5 years ago, after all the stuff with Kane Coulter, is they could have went to compliance offices at the universities and turned them into clearinghouses. So say, look, there is not to be any contact with the athletes themselves. You come to us with your ideas and your proposals, and we'll discuss it with the athletes and then hook you guys up. That's the way to do it, because you don't want somebody going to a strip bar. You don't want somebody, hey, check out Woody's in Cedar Rapids tonight.
Anger is he missed a boatload of money. No, I'm just joking.
Well, there aren't any in Iowa City, but you don't want that. You don't want a business that's bad. You want to make sure they get paid. You want to make sure they take care of their taxes. How bad, and I've had other people saying, well, they're just like any other kid then, right? Well, do you really want the IRS coming to practice in August saying, hey, your guy made $20,000 last year and didn't pay a dime in taxes?
Yeah.
Get him off the practice field.
Most kids that age, or many kids that age that are in college full time, aren't even making enough money to have to necessarily even pay taxes. Yeah. If there's one area of abuse of this that that popped into my head the other day, it would be an attempt to circumvent the 85 scholarship limit by the really big booster car dealership agreeing to an endorsement deal for a really good player as a walk-on.
Oh, right.
As a walk-on, to where you can start stacking 5 walk-ons at Ohio State that are 4-star players that had 40 offers to other schools. But I'm going to go to Ohio State because Jimbo Chevrolet's already got me hooked up with a deal. That's kind of the only hole that I've been able to poke into this. But I would rather the players have the opportunity that every other American has. And yes, there will be unintended consequences, but there always are. That doesn't mean you don't attempt to do something just because there might be bad things that happen.
Yeah, the fear of the unknown.
I think it's conservatism is part of it, but I also think you guys are right. Fear of the unknown could drive people here. People who just inherently don't think college athletes should get paid.
Yeah,
I could see them just forget about your politics. I mean, I could see people standing on that and that hill.
Oh yeah,
for whatever reason.
yeah. I mean, I recognize my opinion is very far to the let them play. I am an entrepreneur, risk taker. So I mean, and my my risk taking tolerance is probably on the other side of my political background. So I'm kind of going all over here as it relates on the scale. So I recognize I'm an extreme on one side. So
do you guys think? Since I think J-Bo is kind of a Snake Plissken of Iowa athletics.
I love that. That's awesome.
Do you guys think that he just says, screw it, I'm gonna get paid next year?
I have been, here, I don't know that he will, because I think he's a team player and he wouldn't want to put his teammates at risk and
cancel a season.
Not cancel a season, but make himself ineligible when he's talked with Fran that he's going to come back and be the shooter. And then all of a sudden Jordan tries to push the envelope, because Mark Emmert, NCAA President Mark Emmert, already has said that he won't hold it against any of these players from states that have approved NIL opportunities, that he won't rule them ineligible, which unfortunately, as far as I would tell Mark, and I'm not a lawyer, but you can't do that for one group of people and not allow another group of people to be able to do it as well. So I think that Jordan Bohannon and anybody from these states can do it, and they aren't going to be ruled ineligible by the NCAA, because there would be a whole mess of lawsuits. I just don't know that Jordan would do that, because he wouldn't want to risk it for his teammates. But I think they could, and I think they would get away with it.
I think what he'll do is he'll chat with compliance at Iowa and say, hey, if I do this based on 18 other states or whatever it is that have passed these rules, if I say, you know what, I don't care if there's a law or not in Iowa, I'm going to do this, what would you say? Would I be ineligible? Because I don't think he would. I do think he has enough respect for Fran, for the game, for his teammates to not just do that. But I think he'll push the envelope as far as he can. He already has. And so that I totally think that if he can monetize the Standpoint, his podcast, he will. And he'll monetize other routes as well. And
he should.
Snake Plissken, man. I love that. That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, that's really good. But you bring up a really key phraseology there, if that's even a word, Scott. Yeah. I don't believe it's illegal. Obviously, multiple states have different laws.
Great point.
So that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if it's not illegal in Iowa, then there's no legal jurisdictions. Then I don't think there's any way possible that's an athlete at the state of Iowa, whether it be a Hawkeye or a Cyclone, couldn't go out and monetize their NIL and be ruled ineligible by the NCAA, because athletes in other states are able to do the same thing. As long as it's not illegal, I think they can do it. We'll see if somebody tests it.
Yeah, and you look at both major universities in the state of Iowa, especially in football and basketball to some extent. They have athletes who can go out and make significant money right now. I mean, Brock Purdy or Breece Hall at Iowa State.
Oh, yeah.
Iowa, you have Tyler Goodson. Tyler Linderbaum could, he could lift cars over his head and walk down the street. And, what do you call him? Is it top rope?
Top rope.
Top rope can get paid for winning the Sola and Beef Days hay bale competition.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad they'll probably have that this year. I can't wait.
I hope they do. That's right. I forgot about that. Last year they didn't have it.
Yeah.
Anything else going on, Scott? Or
you liking The Athletic? What's going on there?
I love The Athletic. It's been crazy. It's been crazy good because Mark and I have had a lot of discussions over the years about some of our we've had issues with where we used to work, and it's really the opposite now. They let you go. They have an expectation. You fulfill it, but it's also kind of cool to be a part of a national network in some ways because somebody's doing something somewhere or covering some angle that maybe you're not getting to. Like right now, like Nicole Auerbach is down in Phoenix with all the Big Ten,
yeah.
80s and Andy Staples, like last week with all of the college football playoff expansion talk. I mean, to get plugged in and then all of a sudden, hey, I'm on a text group. Hey, have you talked to so-and-so? Have you talked to so-and-so? What do you think? And next thing you know, we've got 5 people on the, off on background, but we'll talk and just not use their names anonymously. And it's kind of neat to be a part of that. And yes, college football playoff expansion is coming. It's going to be bigger than we expect. It's probably going to be in the 12 range.
Are you good with it? 12?
My preference, and I'm the old man when it comes to this stuff, is let's go back to the old days of the Bulls and then have 4 teams play after the fact.
Yes. But 12 is good too.
Yeah, right. Hey, they're going to be on campus.
They want to be on campus, and they want it to be more than just Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I got out of last week.
There was some fatigue there, no question. And I think because the rest of us, it's like the championship ratings went down quite a bit, and it's like, yeah, but we've already seen this, and we've already seen this. So people are just like, we want something different. So yeah, they want more access, maybe for all the champions, to allow that Cinderella in there, to have some games that are on campus sites. I mean, can you imagine like this year? Let's say Iowa wins the Big Ten and would host a Florida, in the second week of December, or a Georgia or somebody like that. How awesome that would be. Or Wisconsin do that, or, Ohio State. I mean, it flips the script. And then, I'm a sucker for the Bulls, but the Bulls are dying. And we saw it last year.
Yep.
The Bulls, college football finally figured out last year during the pandemic that college football is more important than the Bulls. And they could tell the Bulls what they wanted. They moved the Rose Bowl because they couldn't get fans at it.
Right.
So that means college football has won the day. But I like the Rose Bowl too.
Right.
Yep.
That's all I got. Mark, you got anything else? I mean, obviously we could go for multiple hours, but we appreciate the time.
How did the first mow go?
The first mow outside?
Yeah.
It went all right.
Shoes holding up? Shoes holding up good?
Hey, I am done with the Air Dads, man. They're just my lawn mowing shoes from now on. So I've caught enough grief for that.
Have you found a good strain of Sam Adams Oktoberfest?
It's too early for that. But I did when I was in Madison. I was driving back from Milwaukee with my son, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. I did stop in Madison. I picked up some Badger Ale, amber ale.
Right.
It was really good, man. It was good. I'm kind of like the ambers. That's kind of where I'm at. So that's why it naturally goes into that Oktoberfest.
Yinglings? No, you got an Yingling stash anywhere?
No, I haven't. Do they sell it in Galena?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I think it's right next. I think it's in Indiana, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, it is. So next time I'm in Indiana, I'll have to get that or go to that speed metal place, Three Floyds, that you like so much.
I'll bet Halas probably doesn't miss those stops, but
No.
I'll bet he kind of does.
I bet he misses rolling his eyes walking into a place where you can't hear yourself think, and it's like gore in the.
It was gore,
disturbed, and all these.
But he remembered the pork belly tacos. That's all that matters, right?
Where the carpet's on the wall, but not the floor.
You got to make your own fun on the road. You really do, because you'll go crazy otherwise.
Yeah, there's always some stop in some town, Leroy or Tyrone, Pennsylvania, or Oh man, yeah, we could go on all day about those road trips.
Sometime this summer, that would be the Horse Latitudes podcast for a reconvening.
Yes.
I want to hear your guys' stories, but
You betcha.
yeah. Well, Scott, really appreciate you coming
thanks,
on
man. Appreciate
so
it.
much. Really enjoy it.
Good seeing you.
Yeah, great seeing you too.
Check out Scott's work at theathletic.com. Scott, what's the best way for Iowa fans to subscribe that helps you?
Go to one of my stories, and
Okay.
when you subscribe, then it kind of counts in my direction.
Okay.
And I don't have a quota per se. I mean, I have a goal, so that because you don't want, hey, you're 4 months into the year and you've only got 3 subscriptions. That means you might want to start writing stories that people care about, but more than anything. But it does matter in the end. I mean, I don't get an extra bonus or anything.
And never be afraid to sell yourself. Never be afraid to sell yourself.
Right.
So follow Scott at Scott Dochterman on Twitter. I'm sure all of you listening to this already are, but just in case, and then click on his stories and sign up that way. I subscribe to The Athletic, and I read it probably Hawkeyes and Royals almost every day, something. And that's the fun thing about an athletic subscription. You sign up on Scott's story, but then you can go read about your favorite football, basketball, baseball, hockey teams as well. And that's
I'm glad I remembered
cool.
hockey. I'm glad you remembered hockey.
Only because you're here.
Yeah,
I
right.
throw hockey in, but
You're wearing a Blackhawks hoodie, yeah.
yeah. So we also want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank FongsPizza.com, Fong's Pizza in Cedar Rapids and Des Moines. You saw their video in the front. You also saw the video of BarntownBrewing.com. And we thank Heartland Flagpoles and Flags. That's HeartlandFlags.com. Go to HawkeyePodcast.com. You'll see their banners all over the place if you can't remember those URLs. So thanks again, Scott. Thank you, Mark, for your time. Thank you for your time listening to this or watching it. And we will